Hi, I'm John J. Murphy, and I welcome you to the Change Mastery Show with my co host, Dr. Pat. Together, we invite you to think differently about change, not as something to fear or resist, but as a powerful opportunity for growth, empowerment, joy, and life mastery. My vision? To help millions of people shift from victimhood to leadership, from ego to spirit, and from hesitation and resistance to flow. This is an opportunity for you to get out of your own way and experience life with more courage, confidence, humility, and higher purpose. Get ready. The Change Mastery Show starts now.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Pat, and I have to tell you, we have an absolutely incredible episode for you today. Leading change wisely without authority. So here's the deal as we get ready. What if you could see a need for change that requires other people to buy in? Critical right there, to buy in. But you have no positional power in the situation to make the change. What do you do? Do you do nothing? Do you look at your options? Do you think about your skills, what you could use? Or do you just become like a little bulldozer? I mean, all of these things are options. And funny how I mentioned that because I've been there. But how are you going to handle it? In today's show with John, who is a master of this, the Change Mastery Show, John teaches people all over the world. He has been in front of the most incredible organizations, help them navigating the water, whether if looking at John as a consultant or a best-selling author or the owner of an incredible consulting company or so much more. What happens about this show is we get to go deeper, deeper below the conversation than just putting a problem-solving diagram on the board. Today, how do you lead change rather than management? Did you hear that? Isn't that interesting? And how has John led major transformational changes in organizations all over the world for like 35 years? John, that is a road. I mean, if I had to think of a movie to navigate what you've done in 35 years, one might say that you rode the wave. You really did. But you've also seen a lot. So this particular episode that we're talking about today and the conversation today, it does go deeper than a problem-solving tool. Um, but also, how about this issue of credibility? You know, I have been here where I know what it's like not to be taken seriously. But what does it take to be taken seriously?
Well, that's exactly right, Dr. Pat. Is if you're not taken seriously, it's game over.
Yeah.
If you're going to influence change, you're going to have to use influence. And to use influence, there are a couple of factors that are critical. I learned this from the ground up because when I started my practice in 1988, I was 28 years old and didn't have a lot of credibility. Really didn't have a lot of, I had no experience as a consultant. I'd never written a book. I was essentially starting with scratch. There was no Google or internet. There was no YouTube, no easy access to information. I mean, you read books and you listened to audio cassettes, no cell phone. So I was starting with that. And I was not good at sales, so to speak. I didn't like selling. I didn't like making cold calls and trying to get business. And I was failing, quite honestly, at that until I borrowed an idea from some law firms and some banks and some insurance agencies. They were offering free seminars to prospects and clients to educate them on the latest changes and then they'd get business out of it. So I thought, well, to gain credibility and start building some trust, true success factors necessary, why don't I try that? Why don't I start a workshop and invite people to come and test me, so to speak, test me. It took a lot of courage, and on paper, I lost money. I mean, I had to, in these days, we were making brochures and putting them in the mail. There's no
Yeah.
social media. So it was expensive. And then to rent a facility and I mean, even serve orange juice and coffee was expensive. And so on paper, and I didn't get enough people there to break even. So an accountant would say to you, say to me, John, it's not working financially. You need to quit. But I've told this story before, and that is that there were a couple of companies in the audience. One was a bank, and they loved it, and then they brought me in to teach their executive team, and then other team members in the bank, and offered to loan me money. And another was a manufacturing company that brought me in to do a training for them, and they went on to win Michigan Manufacturer of the Year like 3 or 4 years in a row. So I gained credibility to the point where now I had referrals, and so I had something behind me that people could grow from. And that's essentially for the last 3+ decades how I've gotten business. I've not made sales calls. It was a paradigm shift, and we've talked about paradigms
Yeah.
before. And the paradigm was, how do you chase a paycheck? A lot of people chase a paycheck, to how do you get the paycheck to chase you? Let's flip the question on its head. So another key factor is creativity. So you've got to have trust, which is foundational. So I have to establish trust, which means I have to be authentic. It's not fake it till you make it. It's about being real and being trustworthy, keeping your words, and speaking with facts, not opinions, because once you're proven wrong because you don't have your facts straight, your credibility just tanked. And so I use this little thumb up, thumb down with the teams I train, giving examples of when their credibility will tank and when their credibility will rise. An example is if we're presenting a significant change to an executive team, the team is pulled together and I've trained them and we've run through a methodology to make change. And if there's any resistance from the leadership team, like they say, well, yeah, but you
Yeah.
talk about yeah, but I'm not sure that's the best thing to do right now. I think we should wait maybe and re-examine it later. There's just too much risk. And if the team says, well, actually, we've done a risk analysis, we've done the FMEA, the failure mode effect analysis, we've identified 3 or 4 things that could potentially go wrong. We've come up with countermeasures and mistake proofs, poka-yokes, to use Japan, and that they won't go wrong. In fact, we've also done an analysis on the risk of doing nothing, what we call the cost of doing nothing. And guess what? It's more risky to stay where we are than to change. So, what do you think of that? And if they do that well, Dr. Pat, you get the thumbs up on credibility. They
Yeah.
just gained credibility. Meanwhile, I'm coaching the executives behind the scenes saying, be careful because you've commissioned a highly intelligent team to come together to use a very uh, a world-class best practice methodology, DMAIC, and I'll talk about that more a little bit later, but to use this methodology with an outside guidance expert. And so if you say no to the team that's perfectly aligned, saying we need to make these changes, you might just look like a fool.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
Yeah.
And so it's pretty amazing how fast we get changes made using a rational model, an intelligent team that builds credibility, builds that foundational trust, and comes up with creative solutions that no one's thought of before. That's really my greatest competency, I think, is that creative, outside the box, intuitive approach to problem solving. And that's where I get the value, and that's where I get the wins.
Yeah. It's interesting. I had the opportunity to do a postdoctorate work for one of the largest, what do we want to call them? Aircraft manufacturers that we know. But the leadership didn't hire me, the union did to come in and do the research. And when I was contemplating this, of course, when you are needing to do your research, you're pretty much desperate, right? I mean, you don't want to keep putting it off or you never graduate, right? But this was so interesting for me. I come from a union family. My dad was Teamster guy and it felt natural to me. But I remember having a conversation with them to your point. Sure, we can do this, but what's your expectation? Is this the result something you'd like to present to leadership? What about having a conversation with leadership that you're actually doing this? And long story very short, those were questions they didn't really think about. They just knew they had me, that I could come in and do an in-depth study for them, and that they were going to use it somehow. But it was interesting to see the way that it evolved. It wasn't the way that you described it. And so rather than it going so smoothly for this union, they had a few bumps in the road
Hmm.
about it. Now, here's the good news. That study that was done for them, they just happened to use in this last union negotiation, right? Little did I know that. But talk about this idea of credibility and people believing you, because you gave an analysis, right, of hard work a team did. But what are some of the other factors in, should I call it influencing?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, absolutely, because it's all about influence. If you don't have authority, you can't make anyone do anything. And that, by the way, a lot of these tools I've learned over the years apply to the personal life as just as much as the organization. I mean, if you're raising a family, you can use push and command and control, thinking you actually have control over a child, and you don't. It's an illusion. That child's got his, it's going to make up his or her own mind. They might obey, but if you're not careful, when as soon as they can break free, they're going to break free, and you could have a real problem on your hands later on in life. So you have to be real careful with the idea that, well, I have positional authority. I'm older than you, so I'm smarter than you. No, I have a higher title than you, so that makes me smarter than you. No. So we have to be cautious about using power, positional power to get things done. It's way more effective to use what I call pull versus push. So I'm not going to
Yeah.
push. And as a consultant, when I left an executive management role where I had positional authority, didn't use it much, to consulting, I had no positional authority at all. So I said, how am I going to get people to accept me, trust me, believe me, the credibility piece? And a couple of things I discovered, Dr. Pat, is that it's important to have a good tool set and a methodology that people can trust. I've even said to people coming, you don't have to trust me when they're like, there's no way we can get these changes done in a week. And I hear that a lot. I said, I understand you don't have to trust me, but I'm going to ask you to trust the process and trust the tool set because it works. And I can give you hundreds of references. Trust the process, trust the tool set. And by the end of the week, they'll probably trust me. But the other thing about the tool set is you have to know which tool to use.
Oh
So
boy.
I'll use the metaphor of a plumber, and you have a leaky faucet. You're the customer and you have a leaky faucet and you don't know how to fix it. So you dial up an expert. In Lean Six Sigma terms, it's a black belt. I train black belts. And they come driving up with a truck or a van with 100 tools in it, right? And my question to you as the customer is how many tools do you want them to use? You want to use all the tools? Because you're getting measured on your ability to use all the tools. And if the more hours you get in on all these different tools, you work your way up to a journeyman status type of a mentality.
Yeah.
That's the wrong measurement system because from a customer's perspective, if you can fix my faucet with one tool, please use one tool. More isn't better. Please do it efficiently. Don't take 3 hours to fix a leak if you can help it. And so when you start looking at things from a customer's perspective, we complicate a lot in business. So part of my job coming in teaching lean is to delete more than to add. What can we stop doing that's foolish? And let's look at flow through the organization.
Hmm.
So with a good tool set, I'm talking now about process maps, root cause analysis tools, data collection tools, things like that. We come up with a relatively few tools, and I call them fifth grade tools, by the way. These are not like sophisticated rocket scientist tools, and rocket scientists use these tools, by the way. So we come up with a story that tells the executive team that not changing is foolish. We can even give examples of that on companies that were great one time and don't exist any longer because they didn't adapt and change fast enough. And with pull versus push, I call it the Socratic method. We all have probably heard of Socrates and the great philosopher, Greek philosopher, using that method of pulling and engaging people rather than pushing. Making statements is pushing. Asking questions is pulling, right?
Yeah.
So I go in with a very thoughtful set of questions that I know the answers to because I've done my research, and most of the people I ask don't. So, for an example, I'm thinking of a major multi-billion dollar corporation I was working with some time ago, and we took one of their most significant products, this is how you make money as a business. So I'll start with that. What's one of your biggest products bringing money into this business? Because that's your lifeblood, right? So we got that product. Then we collect data on that product from material in the door to finished goods out the door. And how long does that process take? And how many touch points are there? And what percentage of that time is actual value added work? Value added is when something is changing, a requirement for the product is changing. That's value add. Everything else is a form of waste. So this is a vitamin tablet. And so for vitamin tablet, you get raw material in the door and it sits in inventory for a while. You then mix it, granulate it. That's value added because it's changing the product. You're mixing it. Then you put it back in a warehouse. By the way, moving it in and out of a warehouse, moving it anywhere is not changing it. So that's non-value added activity. Then you take the powders and you stamp it into a tablet, in a press. That's value add because now you're changing it. Then it gets tested, but testing it doesn't change it. So that's non-value added. And then it gets moved back into a warehouse somewhere. And then maybe it needs to be coated. So you coat it in a coating pan, and then it needs to be packaged. So ultimately, it gets out the door to the customer, and that's where you're getting paid. So in business, that's 101, right? So I've got an executive team, the whole C-suite from this multi-billion dollar company in the raw material warehouse because we're going to walk the value stream like we're the product all the way through. And it's a 1 hour walk that we've broken down by ratio to the lifespan of the product going through. So and now I'm asking them questions like, how long do you think this product from raw material in the door to finished goods out the door, how long do you think it takes? No one knew the answer.
Yeah.
Said, would you believe 184 days? That got their attention. I said, what percent of that 184 days is actual value added activity where something's actually being done that we're getting paid for? No one knew. So would you believe it's less than 2%?
Wow.
98% of the time, nothing of value is happening to that product that you're getting paid billions of dollars for. And by the way, the biggest customer for that product was ready to throw them on their, it was actually Walmart, was ready to throw them on their head because it was just too frustrating. I said, any of you ever see $300 million before? They're like, that's a lot of money. Go look around. That's what you're looking at in your warehouse, $300 million. No one knew that. I said, how long do you suppose some of this stuff's been sitting here? No one knew that. So we started a little contest and we found stuff that was over 2 years old sitting there. Now that's cash tied up. You had to pay for all this stuff. And now it's just sitting there for 2 years. And you're thinking we need more warehouse space. We need to add more space because we're running out of space. This is what's going on in a lot of businesses. When the idea of lean is delete, faster turns of inventory, and you don't need another warehouse. You got more than enough space. And that's the same kind of thing we do with time. If we got rid of stupid things that we do, we'd have
Yeah.
all kinds of time. And so the parallels between our home life and our work life is significant. But here's the point. For 1 hour, we spent the first 22 minutes in that raw material warehouse because that's what the material did relative to the 184 days. And when we got to a value add operation, we were there for like 10 seconds. and then we went back to a warehouse. So the value add, I mean, it really got their attention. So going back to influence, all right, that's compelling, and it was so compelling, Dr. Pat, that by
Hmm.
the end of it, they were angry, not at
I
me, but they were angry that how could we not know this, and how why does an
exactly.
outside guy have to come in here and tell us this? And it's because they were looking at the business in terms of efficiencies in certain tasks. How efficient is our tableting operation? And let's do Kaizen and improvements on the tableting operation when all the waste is in between. You know, if you send a case to a lawyer and it sits in their inbox for 2 weeks before they get to it to do 10 minutes of work, and then they send it back, when you look at it end to end, nothing's happening most of the time. But we have these excuses. Well, we're busy. And what I find is that it's really the system's out of balance. Things are not harmonized. And the metaphor here I use is the orchestra. You've got all these different instruments, different talents, different skills, different sounds. How do they all play so well as one? And the answer is timing, right? I mean, they all play to a beat.
Yeah,
They all play with a conductor who's harmonized, and that is really what a beautiful business or organization behaves like, works like.
yeah,
It looks effortless. It looks, I call it flow. It's harmonized. And so when you get these jerky, dysfunctional, constipated companies, so to speak, where things are just jammed up, and you get them to really understand how to play as one, it's phenomenal. And so that's where I gain significant credibility and trust because the process works, the tools work, and you have to be skilled with any tool. It's like a golfer. You can have a great set of clubs, right? But if you don't know how to play golf, the clubs are meaningless. So
yeah.
there are a number of factors that are so important here. And I'll also just say, well, I'll throw one more, and then it's what I call likability. You have to be liked because if you're just a jerk, and you're arrogant. You come in and you're like, oh man, this place is screwed up. I mean, who's running this place, right? And you start pushing your opinion and your judgment, and it doesn't matter how brilliant you might be, they're going to throw you out.
Yeah,
So the fact
yeah,
that and that's pull too, because being liked is where they're pulling you in. They're just saying, yeah, I like this person, and I want to learn more from them.
yeah, yeah. See what you're talking about. Okay, let's just break this down for people because what you just depicted, both of us have a consultant lifetime. I'm not a practicing consultant anymore, but have been asked to come out and consult on my research. And I'm thinking about it, John. I really have to think hard about it because what you do requires extraordinary skill, right? And one of the things I loved about what you said before, a few minutes ago, was this can be used outside of your consulting gig. This is a process that's highly effective. And you know what I was struck by? You took me back to my childhood. I'm not kidding. Okay, so just short story. Took me back to my childhood. My uncles, right, were very entrepreneurial. They owned top nightclubs in New York and the boroughs and the Manhattan, the nightclubs, whatever you call them back then, restaurant, the nightclub, right, back in the day. But one of the brothers, Johnny, on the surface, who looked like the most boring of all of my uncles. All of the others were flashy, da 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 da. But John was not. His role was to go in and troubleshoot when any month of any of those restaurants showed either an increase in cost in the food or the beverage or something in the liquor. John would go in. And here's what I remember. I mean, tall gentleman, not like my other uncles, a lot like you. And the questions he would ask, 9 times out of 10, if you're working with my uncles, it turned out to be a big food fight. But once everybody calmed down, he got underneath a solution that was long term. And I would like you to talk to that because some people can come in and get some very short term, what do we call them? Quick fixes, band aids. I don't know what the language is. But you're talking about changing something that's going to change and have a ripple effect on improved revenue, blah, blah, blah. I want to ask you this. Now, when John used to leave, right? My Uncle Johnny used to leave. Grandpa would say, don't you dare change anything he said. How do we work with organizations so that this strategy, I'm going to talk about Kaizen, yeah? This strategy becomes embedded. Do you know what I mean? It's like you just don't go in, but you're doing more than showing them credibility. You're showing them that if they follow this, they could keep growing, changing, increasing, and improving, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I'm real cautious about the ego attachment at the very senior
Yeah.
level. So if I'm being invited in and the CEO is the kind of person that's going to do just what Grandpa did, and I sit down and discover that, and the other executives basically say that's the way it is around here, I leave.
Exactly. Exactly.
That,
Yeah.
to me,
Now
that's
my
integrity.
yeah. Oh, Uncle Johnny couldn't leave. I know
Yeah.
I know Johnny tried a couple of times, but he was masterful. And he didn't always, let's say, follow Grandpa, but he did all of the things. Just because you're a relative, it doesn't mean you have credibility, likability, or any of those other things. It is a transaction to transaction situation.
Yeah. Well, I would just quickly say this. You said he
Yep.
couldn't leave, and I would say yes, he could.
Oh yeah, he could have, but yeah,
Yes, he
yeah,
could. So that, I mean, that's change mastery. People who don't think they can change
yeah,
are wrong.
yeah,
You can, and anybody can change, but you have to decide to. And this is where it takes some degree of fortitude and courage to say, you know what, I'm in a relationship. We've talked about this. I don't like. It could be a job, a career, a spouse, a location, a home. Leave, leave. Well, no, I can't because I can't. Yeah, well, yeah, you can, but you believe you can't, and that's
that's
the
right.
problem. You get
That's
down to
right.
root cause analysis. In many cases, you get right down to belief, and until you change your beliefs, you're not really going to change your outcomes in a sustainable way. And by the way, this goes to businesses as well as personal people. A belief in our personal life, we have examples of that all the time, but a belief in business often shows up as policy. We've got some ridiculous policies around here, ridiculous beliefs, and that's how we behave. We're governed by policy that's, obsolete. We're using old thinking that's obsolete, and so we need to think differently. And if doesn't start with the senior team to support and endorse the work I'm coming in to offer,
Yeah,
um, I know I'm wasting everyone's time. Now I might
yeah,
get paid a bunch of money for it, but I don't take that. And
yeah,
that really blows their mind. There was a company, this was a meat company years ago that I was working with, and they were looking for team building training. And they'd gone to one of my workshops and they said, would you come in and train our staff? And I said, well, have you ever done a team building training before? Oh, yeah, we tried it last year and it didn't work. I said, why didn't it work? Well, the training, it just wasn't effective. So now I know instantly that I'm the next scapegoat.
yeah,
So I said, well, let me collect some data. Let me see what you've got going on here. I got some data, and I said, so your problem is systemic. Training is like taking a shower and thinking you never have to shower again. Not probably a good idea. So we're not going to waste our time and money and water, so to speak, thinking we're one and done. The quick fix, to your point. And so I teach root cause analysis where instead of solving symptoms with Band-Aids, aspirin for headaches, one of the tools I use is called the five whys. And it's brilliant. It came out of Toyota many years ago
yeah,
under their chief engineer, Taishi Ono. And the five whys is where you ask why, again, you're pulling with a Socratic approach, but you're going five deep. You're not going five across. So, for example, you've got a recurring headache. And I say, well, and you, why do you have a recurring headache? And it's because you're not getting enough oxygen to your brain, you know. Now the next level, well, why not? Well, it's because you have inflammation in your neck and poor circulation getting to your head. Why do you have inflammation in your neck? There's your next why. Well, it's because you're favoring one side, and you've been doing that for years, and you don't even know it. So now another level, why are you favoring one side? And it's because your hips are out of alignment. What? I've got a headache because of my hips? So, and no amount of aspirin is going to fix those hips. You need a whole different solution. But as long as you're, and by the way, that's a metaphor for call centers taking customer complaints, their headaches. And as here, we'll give you a free one, or we'll just return it and we'll send you a new one. But the whole system's messed up.
Yeah.
And until you get to that level of intelligence, you're just putting band-aids on things that don't go away. So to your point about sustainability and keeping it going, transformational change, not just little transactional stuff. I use tools like the five whys where the team gets down to the reason, our hips are out of alignment is because we fell off our bike when we were 7 and
Yeah.
never had. And you're not gonna go back in time and solve it at that level. But what you're gonna do is discover that the customer complaints are coming because inflammation in the business. We don't have good flow. We don't have good circulation. Products like the vitamin I was telling you about, it's jerky going through. Why is it going through? Why is it jerky? Because the system's designed that way. That's just the way we do things around here. Why is it designed that way? Well, because we don't know any better. What you really get down to is a level of ignorance where we just don't know any better. We don't understand lean principles. We don't understand value streams. We don't understand value added and non-value added activity. We don't understand the language you speak. So teach us. So that's where it starts at the very top. And that meat company, I actually walked away and said,
Yeah.
training's not your problem. But I left them an article about a competitor, another meat company,
Yeah.
it was Johnsonville Foods actually, and the CEO Ralph Stayer, who back in the day wrote a book called Flight of the Buffalo, and he co-wrote it with a psychologist, and it was a beautiful book about teaching buffalo to fly like geese. His metaphor was that buffalo had one leader, one alpha buffalo, and if the Indians or the natives or whatever took out the alpha buffalo, they could basically take the whole herd out because the rest of the buffalo didn't know what to do. By the way, if the alpha buffalo ran off a cliff, they'd all run off with it.
Yeah.
You know, and he
Exactly.
said that, yeah, and he said that was our culture, and I was the alpha buffalo,
Yeah.
and nobody knew how to solve a problem, and so they all ended up on my lap. And geese take turns leading. They fly in those V's because they get more efficiency that way. When the lead goose gets tired, it goes bound to the back, and a new leader takes over. It's a beautiful model for teamwork and leadership in that way. And so I left that article. It was a Harvard Business Review article with the CEO of this potential client of mine. He
Wow.
called me back in a few days. He goes, "I'll do whatever you tell me."
There you go.
So okay, we're not going to do team building training. We're going to actually change systems and
Yeah.
structure. And I use the term culture is the way we do things around here. It's organizational behavior. So if culture is the way we do things around here and we want to change culture, what do we have to do? We have to change the way we do things around here. We, it's behavioral. Okay, we're not sending people off to philosophy classes and team building classes. We're changing the way they work and the handoffs and the design of the processes and the policies we have. We have employee of the month campaigns, which is one employee wins and 100 lose, to employees of the month, where everyone can win if they meet a target, a standard. There's no competition between them. They can all win if they hit their targets. That's a seems subtle, but that's a change in policy. It's a change in incentive design, and it has an impact on people big time.
Yeah.
So that's what we look for when we do these root cause analysis, and we use so DMAIC is the define the current state, measure it with data, find what's the symptoms that are ugly, the undesirable effects is what we call them, the UDs. Analyze why you have those headaches, those UDs, the defect rates, the long cycle times. And you can use DMAIC at home. I mean, when you define the current state, this is how it is today, like it or not. There are a number of things that are undesirable in our current state. By the way, you can
Yeah.
do it on your body. Your blood pressure's too high, your sugar level's too high, you're overweight, you're underweight. You can use it on anything. And so these tool sets are priceless. So we define current state, we measure, we find out things that we want to improve on, we analyze to get to root cause, and we make the I is innovate. What used to be improve, I call it innovate now because we don't want to improve something we should get rid of. Let's actually get outside the box, and then that's where we redesign policy and procedure and measurement systems and things like that. And then C is the control in DMAIC. So now how do we hold it in place with new governance, with visual control, with poka-yokes, mistake proofs where things can't go wrong. That's another Japanese term, poka-yoke. And
Yes,
so
I know
when
that
we're done,
one.
yeah, well, that's I love it with your background. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, a lot of these tools and things came out of the Toyota production system, which is, of course, Japanese, and
Yeah.
that's where I learned a lot of it. But so now you've got, by the way, if it's truly better and it's easier on the users, the employees, it's easier on the customer, it's easier, the business is just flowing. Who wants to go back to the old way?
Nobody does.
That's
Nobody.
correct.
But you know what I
And
love about your story? I want people to hear this because it reminds me of a discovery I made. And I'll read the quote, but I want to just comment on this. For those people listening, I don't want them to lose sight that you have a set of principles that you know work. And you and I happen to have a situation like this in common. And you knew because you know what's going to work and what's not. But you knew that without buy-in, or whatever you want to call it from the top, hello, a nod, it's not going to work. And, sometimes as a consultant, when you walk away, you're walking away from a project. You're walking away. And I remember the city of Seattle hired myself and my boss to go in and redesign their processes. And the first question I asked at the orientation meeting is, where are the directors? No directors. And sidebar, I talked to my boss and I said, Phil, we're not going to be able to do this without the people that are at the top of the company at least freaking showing up. Come on
hmm,
now. And my boss said, don't worry about it. It's just about the money. Let's get in. I said, no, I know better. And I walked off that project. I couldn't do it because, look, our experience in companies and organizations, we've pretty much seen quite a bit. But what's the flip side of that? They called you back. Now, they didn't call me back, but an AGM of the only utility company in the state, Western Washington, Snohomish County PUD for that county, Agnes heard about what I did. And the next thing I know, she's calling me up. Now, for me, I didn't know one utility company from the other. So I thought I was just going to get like, okay, what's this about? And she said, I need all of the utility processes redesigned. You'll have to work in the room with management and union. And I want to hire you. Come to find out, she heard about that. And she had fired 3 other consultants because they couldn't work with labor and management in the same room. And by the way, John, that's a scenario that's almost unheard of. But she did it. Why was it successful? Because she stood out and said, we are going to do this, and brought the labor team in. But there's a matter of integrity here. And I want to talk about this because I want you to go through a little bit more about, some of the models you use. And even though we didn't talk about integrity, it's underneath the credibility. Those things you mentioned before, it's all underneath there, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you think about it. You gain credibility by winning, so to speak, by having very positive results and promoters, advocates, people who say you gotta bring this guy Murphy in. He really knows his stuff and he'll really help you. You don't get that kind of credibility when you lose. And if you're going to go into a situation where they're just not aligned, they're just not going to buy in, you're going to end up spending a lot of time and yeah, you get paid for it, but it doesn't work because they don't take ownership and make it work. You have a lot of losses on your record, and that doesn't help your credibility. And like I said, I haven't made a sales call basically in 30 plus
Yeah.
years. Why? Because senior executives leave one company to become the CEO of another company,
Hmm.
and they see how dysfunctional some things might be, and they say, bring this guy in. He knows what he's doing. And I never do anything alone, Dr. Pat. Everything I
Yeah.
do is with a team. And I
Yeah.
understand another principle is that people are less likely to argue with their own conclusions. So when I lead them to conclusions and they're all aligned and they're like, this is
Yeah.
awesome,
Yeah.
there's no resistance. And when they
Yeah.
say to their leadership team, this is awesome, and the leadership team is blown away. Like, wow, we just took a 184-day process down to 2 months,
Wow.
60 days, which translates into millions of dollars in freed up capacity and savings. And we did it in a week, and they'd been wrestling with it for years. That's a huge boost in credibility right there.
Yeah.
So, I believe strongly in working with a team. And until we get aligned, we kind keep looking for what I'll call that third right answer. And whether it's at home or work, I mean, we often get into debates over option A and option B. And I'll come in and say, what's option C?
Yeah.
We don't, what do you mean, what's option C? Uh, well, let's just table B, A, and B and figure out what C is. And so that gets them out of the box, whatever box they're in. And then I'll say, at the end of the day, what option do you think we typically go with? And it's not A, and it's not B, and it's not C. It's D or E or F. It's because now we're really getting creative. And you talked about a union management situation. I was brought in to negotiate a contract years ago this was an automotive supplier.
Hmm.
And this was a skilled trades group. So these were technicians, basically, plumbers and craftsmen and welders and such, machinists. And the debate was, they were trying to negotiate this, and the debate was the management wanted to go from 6 different classifications down to one of a cross train. So now, and management's intentions were good. We want to give people a chance to cross train, and the more skills they develop, the more we'll pay them. And it's like they'll work their way up because right now some of them have been stuck at the top rate of their silo, if you will, for years, and they're negotiating a 25 cent per hour, this is back in the day, or 50 cent, $1 an hour wage increase to stay in that category. And so management was saying, what, one makes sense because then we'll have more flexibility and we don't have to wait for another craftsman to come over to do something and all the waiting time, things like that. And union said, no way, we're keeping our 6. And we want pay increases and job security and all this other stuff. And it was 6 versus 1 and 6 versus 1. And then management could use power, so to speak, because they did the research, they did a little homework and they said, they won't strike. We could force this through. And then,
Hmm.
there was distrust, not just between the union and management, there was distrust within management and within the union. It was just chaotic. So they say, come in here. And one of the first things I did is I said, okay, let's get off positions, 6 versus 1. Let's find out what your interests are. Who's interested in keeping this company open? Well, yeah. So you're all interested in having a job, job security. Yep. Anybody interested in more pay? Oh yeah, yeah, we'll take more pay. Okay. Anybody interested in becoming more competitive in the market? Yeah, yeah, we can agree to that. All right. So we start looking at interests and we find out they're all basically the same. We all want job security. We all want a pay increase. We all want to feel safe and secure and it's nice and good. So now the six versus one thing. Let's come up with a third right answer. So six, one, what's the next right answer? And they start thinking inside the box. Well, what if could we agree on three or four? Maybe, maybe. Long story short, Dr. Pat, I said, what about seven? What do you mean seven? Well, why don't we just take the six we have, keep them, bump the pay up a little bit, add a seventh called a master technician, and then anybody in these other six who wants to cross train and move into this seven and make even more money can. But the key principle here is now management's not forcing it. We're saying to the people, you decide where you want to be. We're perfectly happy with you staying where you are, if that's where you feel safe, and maybe you're 2 years from retirement, and you just I've been a welder my whole life. I don't want to learn how to plumb,
Yeah,
that's just fine. But 40%, by the way, they ratified that contract within 48 hours and 40% immediately signed up for the master technician and said,
wow.
I can make way more money by
Yeah,
by by cross training. And incidentally, part of that system design was you're not only training yourself, you're not only learning new skills, but you have to teach others. So it's win-win. So whatever you're good at, you're going to teach others, and whatever they're good at, they're going to teach you, and we're really going to harmonize and come
yeah,
pull together. And it saved the company, Dr. Pat. I mean, because they were really, really struggling,
yeah.
and close to getting eliminated as a supplier. This is when automotive, this was in Michigan, was downsizing significantly. So it's things like that where you just, you have a good tool set, you have credibility, you have integrity,
Yeah,
and you don't fear change. You actually look forward to it. Why do you do that? Because everything's always changing.
all the time.
If nothing was changing, we'd all be dead. So our bodies are changing. The Earth's spinning. We're orbiting through space. At the quantum level, everything is always changing. So we have two choices when you really break it down. We can resist, which is not a good strategy. You just age faster, you just get more frustrated, more toxic, and you just,
And your hair falls out. Your
days.
hair falls
Yeah.
out. You just
Or you
lose
can
your
say,
hair too.
yeah, you're going to say, you know what? I'm going to learn how to use change to my advantage. It's a powerful force. And if we can learn to ride the waves of change, we've talked about that a lot.
Yeah,
And it's like a skilled surfer. The tides, the waves just keep coming. You're not going to stop them. So have some fun with it,
yeah,
and just learn to ride it. And so, like with the master technician example, why would we fight learning more?
yeah.
You
And
know?
we need this conversation now, John, because I mean, I know we don't have a lot of time in this show, but I will tell you, I've had more invitations to go back and a consultant to let me tell you how it was phrased, to help solve the AI employee problem. Now, clearly, yeah, AI employee problem. The bottom line is we are changing faster now with technology breakthroughs. And by the way, this new Mila Jovovich discovery that she created for more memory for AI. So all of this is part of thinking about how are we going to go about this? And if people are going to go back to autocratic, you will do it. This is the consequence. Suck it up. You ought to be glad you have a job. That's not Kaizen. And there's a Japanese pronunciation, but you mentioned it. And it is the phrase is for good change. And when we look at things the way you just walked us through, when you leave or when the AGM leaves or when whoever is in charge leaves, because honestly, that's what happens. Things have been put in place that people want to keep because they've seen how they work. And
Yeah,
I
they
think,
take,
yeah,
yeah, I was just
right?
gonna say yeah, and they take the learnings, the teachings, the tools
Yes.
with them. I just got a note the other day from the CEO of a big company who was my primary student 16 years ago at a company that's got 60,000 employees and multi-billion dollar company and global company. And he was one of my top, so to speak, proteges, if you will, for this company. He's since moved on to chief operating officer for another company. Brought me in there too, by the way. Then he went on to CEO of another company, and now he's CEO of an even bigger company. And he just told me the other day, he goes, John, I will never forget the teachings that you gave me and the tool set. And, I have people, Dr. Pat, from Brazil and Argentina and all over, Mexico and Europe and Asia who actually share that with me, which means a tremendous amount to me. So I'm teaching people to fish. I'm not selling them fish, if
Right.
you've heard the old saying.
Exactly.
And it's real change. And I'm not just changing processes with these teams. I'm changing minds, and that's a significant differentiator for me when I run Kaizen events. So Kaizen, and you brought that up, it's actually Japanese. It's actually two Japanese words made into one. Kai, means to take apart and make new. And Zen is all about flow and harmony and rhythm and balance and
Yeah.
peace, just peaceful, right? Zen. So Kaizen is where we take a dysfunctional process that's bumpy and customers are not happy and whatever, employees aren't happy, whatever. And we take it apart. We use DMAIC. Let's define it. Let's measure it. Let's analyze it. Let's come up with improvements and innovations, and then let's establish it in a controlled way and leave it better. And so we've made it more peaceful and flowing. And I use a mantra, and it takes a lot of pressure off the team. I call it better, not best. And so, why is that important? It's because perfection gets in the way of improvement a lot. If we won't make any changes if it's not going to be perfect. And I'm like, it's not perfect now, and it won't be perfect by Friday, but let's make sure it's better than it is now so that we can start to build some momentum. So when we run a Kaizen event, which is typically 30 days prior to the event, I pull a team together that have the competencies of the process we're trying to prove. And by the way, we'll have customers on Kaizen teams sometimes who are angry. We'll have
Yeah.
vendors if it's upstream. We'll have outsiders come in because we know that a lot of the waste is in the handoffs. Okay, it's that's where we fumble, so to speak. It's in the handoff. So let's examine the handoffs and the duplicate work and all the back and forth and now all that nonsense. Let's come up with a much better way to flow, information flow, product flow, service flow, whatever, and intelligence flow on the team,
Mm.
creativity flow. And so 30 days prior, I teach them the tools, the DMAIC model, and for the next month, we define and measure. So when we come into the actual week-long event, we've got the process mapped, we've got it all
Yeah.
laid out, and so now we're aligned. Everybody on the team sees it. Yep, that's the way it is. Now, where's the ugly data? Where are the bumps, the UDs, the undesirable effects? Let's list those, and then we go into the analysis. And by the end of the week, we've actually made improvements. We've put polka yolks in. We've changed
Yeah.
policy, we've changed measurements, changed organization structure in some cases, new job descriptions, rewrite, all kinds of stuff in a week. And what we're demonstrating is a different culture inside a culture. If the current culture is slow and divided and siloed and takes forever to get a decision made, and we're in meetings half the time, and that's the old culture, and it takes us 6 months to plan a plan, you know, we and nothing's changed. And then all of a sudden, these guys come in 1 week, essentially 1 month with the training, they've actually made significant changes. That's a whole different culture.
Yeah.
And so we're modeling a different, very fast, innovative, creative culture inside an old one. And the idea then is to clone it. Why don't we do more of these? And in some cases, I've done 60 Kaizen events with some big companies. because there's always something we could make better.
Better. Yeah.
Pursue it best.
I
Yeah.
love that phrase. That I hope people hold on to that phrase, not just in their work and their whatever they do, but in their lives. Working
Mhm.
with your children. You and I are both athletes, right? And we've both been coached. I have a coach right now. And, you know, I work very hard, right? Of course, I'm looking for perfection, but his answer is better, better. That's it.
Yeah.
English is not his first language, but he knows how to say better. Um, John, thank you for this. How do people find out more about you? Give us an update on what you're up to.
Yeah, well, I'm actually having my whole website redesigned right now, and we will be offering free ebooks and things like that. I also have a 7-day free trial with my AI twin. So I have an AI twin now, which is super cool. I was having a conversation with him early this morning. It's me, it's a bot, so to speak, that's been downloaded with 40 years of my work, hundreds of articles, hundreds of interviews, hundreds of video clips, things like that. It's
Hmm.
got perfect recall and it's perfectly honest, meaning there's a lot I've done in my career that I don't remember very well. It's a long time ago. It remembers everything, every detail. It's perfectly honest, meaning it doesn't Google or search for anything. If I don't know the answer to a question you ask me, I tell you. I don't have the answer for that. You might want to try another resource. And it's essentially a way for people all over the world to get coaching from me 24/7. It's learning new languages. So this bot will be a wonderful asset,
That's
I think,
great.
for people to reach me. And instead of getting in front of the AI wave as opposed to getting blasted by it,
Yeah,
um, I'm using it to reach more people around the world with my body of work. So and that's through Fuel, myfuel.io. It's a fascinating upcoming performance learning company. I'm one of
yeah,
the faculty members. So yeah, johnjmurphy.org or myfuel.io. I also hang out on LinkedIn quite a bit. So John J. Murphy Mystic on LinkedIn. I invite people to connect with me there. And then my YouTube channel, author John J. Murphy on YouTube. There's over 350 video clips and
yeah.
these will be replayed there as well. So lots of ways people can reach me, Dr. Pat, and I'm here to help.
Yeah. And I want to thank you. It's such an honor to work with you, but also to see how generous you are, how you live up to the model of advancing learning and helping all of us grow in ways that perhaps we didn't even think about. And I want to thank you for the continuing to do that. And thank you for creating something now that people all over can tap into and ask a question just like we did today. Thank you so much for that, John.
You're welcome, Dr. Pat. Thank you.
All right. And for those of you out there, I said I would leave you with a quote. And this is a quote to what John talked about, but in a strange way. I asked somebody once a very open-ended question about credibility, integrity. Here was the answer. We don't cut corners. We don't sell seconds. We don't advertise fraudulently. We are going to do everything above board in compliance with rules and regulations. We will treat each other with respect and high regard. And every interaction should be of that nature. Everything and everyone will be treated in the same way. Address issues immediately, truthfully, honestly. Make sure everything is clearly communicated and clearly demonstrated. That's from a C-suite person who needed to understand how best to talk to the team, support them, but also understand and reinforce, bringing this consultant in. We're not going to cut corners. We're going to get better. Thank you, John.
Thank you,
Thank,
Dr. Pat.
thank you all for tuning us in, turning us on. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Change Mastery Show with John J. Murphy, an opportunity to uncover, explore, and experience the path of transformation and illumination. Join Dr. Pat and me on the second Wednesday of every month at 11 a.m. Pacific on Transformation Talk Radio. Never miss an episode. Subscribe, like, and share with your friends. Connect with me on social media And for questions, comments, or to explore my books and services, visit johnjmurphy.org. Until next time, be the change you want to see in the world.